Welcome to the Experience Matters podcast. Today, our guest is Jordan Hooker. Jordan leads customer support at Axuall, a workforce intelligence platform that helps healthcare organizations streamline how they manage provider data. At Axuall, Jordan is building support systems from the ground up by focusing on clear processes, smart tooling, and making sure customers get quick, reliable help as the company scales. He also runs his consulting practice, Tavolo Consulting, where he advises companies on how to build scalable support programs without losing the personal touch. And if you've come across the Table Service podcast, that's where Jordan chats with other support leaders about what's changing in this world of CX and what still needs fixing. Welcome, Jordan, and really looking forward to the conversation. So, welcome, Jordan, to the
Yeah.
podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, Jordan, let's start from the start. This is something
Sure.
that I love talking to people about who work in customer experience and customer service.
hmm
It would be great for everyone to know how you got interested in customer
Sure.
service and how you made this your calling and your career.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So it definitely was not the plan. I spent a few years post college working in radio, doing news. So I worked for a network where I was doing news every hour. Kind of just an opportunity just to do some voice work that I had not done before. I'm a musician, as you can see from my instruments here, and so used to being in front of people, used to talking, and used to singing. So it was an interesting opportunity to do that. So I actually moved to Dallas in the hopes, at the point I was living in Tennessee, moved to Dallas in the hopes of getting into a larger market. No success at all. It was, of course, radio. This is this is probably 2011, 2012. So radio's not necessarily doing great anyhow. But moved there, didn't have much luck, and through a family friend, happened to land in a customer support seat for a really early stage startup that was working with nonprofits, and figured out really quickly that I really enjoyed it. Getting on a phone with a customer, walking through challenges, creating experiences for those customers, um, either prior to needing to talk to support. So, what does it look like to really build just a great customer experience? But then, when something doesn't go right, what does it look like to then build an experience that restores that trust, restores that confidence, builds something for the customer? Also, had a COO that invested a lot in me at that point, and so that's just where I stuck. So, I've spent the last 12 years working in customer support, customer experience for primarily early stage startups. Spent a few years working as a customer success manager for a larger company and just didn't really enjoy it. I much prefer the startup world, fast paced, building things from scratch as opposed to building on something else somebody has built. So the last 8 or so of those years, I've been running the support organization for various early to mid stage startups. And really just passionate about what it looks like to build those great experiences, to drive updates and progress in our products from what we learn from our customers through that. And then also to just teach every single person in the company, whether in their support or not, what it looks like to really have a passion for a customer. Because if that passion is there, everything else will turn out great as we work on products, as we sell items, or as we sell products, as we build products, as we build experiences for customers. If we're passionate about that customer, then everything will turn out to be of great value for that customer and for ourselves as well.
Great for that, background and overview, Jordan. Right.
Sure.
Love to get into Axwell and have you give our audience some color on exactly what you do there
Sure.
and
Yeah.
how your work has evolved there.
Absolutely. So, Actual is primarily focused in the healthcare data world. So, what we are on a mission to do is improve what we can to ensure that clinicians are able to spend the most time with patients, are able to serve those patients in the best way possible. So, our primary product that is out on the market is based in credentialing. So, we utilize automation to help. Hospitals, healthcare, staffing organizations to get doctors and other clinicians credentialed as quickly as possible. So if you're a physician and you're going to work at a hospital or going to be affiliated with that hospital and have privileges to work there, you've got to go through what is truly probably the worst background check you've ever been through in your life to make sure that there is nothing in your background, in your history in the profession that would be a problem. And so for decades, how that has happened is you've got an entire office of folks whose responsibility is to take this folder of information about this clinician and then go spend days or weeks calling other hospitals, calling other organizations, getting information, getting files from here, stuff coming through the mail, stuff coming over fax to eventually put a file together that then you take to your credentialing committee who decides, sure, let's let this doctor through the door, or no, we don't want to let them through the door. We've automated a significant portion of that. So now instead of that credentialing office having to go collect almost 100% of that information from various organizations, our solution allows for those credentialing offices to send an invite to a clinician. They provide some information, and then our system goes and pulls all of that information via API into our system. And we've been able to automate anywhere between 90 and 97% of those files. So
Hmm.
the time to get a doctor's file done, get them approved for working in that hospital, and get them in front of patients has decreased in most instances by about half. And so if you think about from a patient experience standpoint and the state we are with healthcare, getting a doctor in front of patients is so critical. And typically, average, it would take about 90 days from start to finish to get somebody in front of patients. And now, in the case of most of our customers, you can get somebody in front of patients much faster. Better patient experience, better clinician experience, better hospital experience. As a business, you are also ensuring that revenue starts to come in so you're able to continue on your mission of helping your patients. So, my role within the organization at Axuall is to build the experience kind of on two sides. One, for our admins from those credentialing offices who are using our tool, what does it look like to help them accomplish everything they need to in the tool? Something goes wrong. What does it look like to figure out where it went wrong and rerun that report? For the clinicians that come through and are using our system, what does it look like to guide them through from start to finish? We find that clinicians, if they log into the wallet, what we refer to as the wallet, which is the application they're filling out, if they leave the application without completing it, you start to see that drop off of we don't come back, they don't come back in to complete it. They don't come back in to complete it. So the more we can keep them in the application and get them through, the better. So my team is trained to provide really white glove service to those clinicians of what does it look like to get them from point A to point B, sign off on everything and send it away. And that's really what I'm working to build at Actual in terms of our support organization.
Interesting. So, from what I understand, you have two key stakeholders, right? You have these doctors or clinicians, right,
Mhm.
who are essentially trying to get credentialed, and you have these hospitals or medical organizations or institutions who
Mhm.
are looking to hire these clinicians and doctors, right? And then
Correct.
you essentially provide, or your team essentially provides, support to both of these stakeholders.
Mhm. That's correct.
Would love to
Mhm.
understand how you structure your team, Jordan.
Sure.
Do you have the same persona doing, both these jobs, or do you try to have, some kind of variation in exactly who does what?
Yeah, it's a great question. This model is very strange because it is a B2B model, but it is also sort of a B2B to C model. We
Hmm.
are supporting both sides of this, but these customers are connected into the same, organization that we're working with. We do have the same team members that are working on most of these things. Some of that just comes from we're a Series B startup. We're pretty early in our existence. So we run a very lean support team, but the way a structure works in our organization, we've got our tier one triage team, have two team members that sit on that team, and they resolve about 60% of our tickets that come through. So whether that's an admin or a clinician, they work through about 60% of that volume. I've got a tier two that is our support engineering team. They take on probably another 30% of that volume. More technical, able to work through issues, get into the code a little bit, figure out where something may be broken and repair it. And then you've got that last like 10, sometimes 15% of volume that actually gets to our engineering team that moves outside of the support organization and we manage. So ultimately, it would be great to be at a spot where maybe we have these clinician specialists who walk clinicians through and do that work, and administrative folks who primarily work with that population of our users. But at the moment, we really do have everybody cross trained and working with all of our customer base.
Makes sense. And when you go about hiring, people for your team, right? I've seen that with support profiles, right? Essentially, you need two core skills. One, of course, you need problem solving. You need to be able to understand exactly what is going on, go into the core of the issue, and exactly figure out what might need to be done, right?
Mhm.
Same time, you need a lot of what I might call soft skills, where you need to genuinely empathize with the customer,
Hmm.
understand where they are coming from, and in one way get in their shoes
Hmm.
to get a deep understanding of exactly what they are experiencing, right? And a lot of times, they are kind of orthogonal, where there are two very different skills that you're looking for, right?
Sure.
And how do you test for these, and how do you assess for these
Hmm.
when you are hiring for your team?
Sure. Yeah, that is absolutely the challenge. You're absolutely right that traditionally you would expect to find somebody with really strong engineering skills that may not have those really great skills that are needed from a soft skills standpoint of ability to sit with a customer, empathize with a customer, understanding what's happening, potentially ability to communicate in a really clear and concise way. And so, in some ways, we are looking for a unicorn, no doubt, of somebody who is able to meet both of those things. I think the key element for me though is hiring for those soft skills. We can teach most of those technical skills to most anybody in terms of understanding what it looks like to begin to build your technical knowledge or technical acumen, be able to work on those issues. And so primarily, I'm looking for those soft skills first and foremost as I'm hiring in. Is it some? Do I find somebody who can communicate with a customer? Can they be concise? Can they think about how the way that they are communicating information to a customer is going to help the customer actually have an understanding, or are they creating more confusion? Are they able to discern when there's a question under the question? I think for all of us who work in support, we know there's often a second question that's hiding back in the background. Are we able to think about and discern what that question may be and either answer it before it even gets asked, or resolve the issue in such a way that the question doesn't even need to be asked? So, particularly for my tier one triage level, that's the thing I'm looking for. I'm looking for folks that are able to work with high volume. They're able to manage multiple conversations in a day. They feel comfortable doing that. Most of the time, they feel empowered and enthusiastic about doing that. We all know sitting on a support desk is a draining exercise for most folks, and so there's a rare breed of people that really likes to do that day in and day out and is wants to grow in that. We're thinking about those more technical roles. Obviously, I've got to backfill a tier two slot every once in a while. So, what does it look like to find somebody that has both those skills? And I think for me, what I am going to primarily go look for is somebody who has spent a lot of time actually on a desk doing that work, and then also has those technical skills and has grown that. So you're looking for somebody that's got a good bit of experience. This is certainly not a entry level role that I'm looking to fill. I'm looking for somebody that's already got that customer facing great experience, but then also has developed that technical skill and acumen that they can come and put both of those into practice from the start.
Any learnings, Jordan, from assessing these, right? I mean, how do you convincingly assess for these soft skills, where you
Mhm.
have enough confidence that you've done a good job?
Sure. Yeah. I think from a technical standpoint, there's a few pieces. I am a non-technical leader. My role is primarily operational. It is primarily process designed and then focused on those soft skills. What does it look like to build those experiences? So for me, unlike potentially some other support leaders that might have a more technical background, I do have to bring in additional resources to help me assess that. So if we're talking about one of those technical leaders or technical roles, I'm going to have some testing that we're going to do there. I'm going to have somebody work through some code. I'm going to do that. I'm not going to have them do hours and hours worth of it. I think you can tell pretty quickly whether somebody has at least some understanding. Also, don't want to make the interview process unnecessarily burdensome, but we can assess relatively quickly if these very particular set of things we need to know that you've got knowledge of. Can you talk us through it? Can you show us examples? That's critical. The other piece, I actually think you can tell most of the time just within a conversation with folks, as you think about those soft skills. Do they communicate in a clear way when you're having conversations with them? When you're trading emails back and forth with them, are they communicating in a clear way? Is their resume written in a way that is actually clear and concise, or are there gigantic blocks of information dropped on the resume? That these none of these are an immediate, like, I'm not going to take a look at this candidate, but these are all things I'm looking at from the start. How you communicate, how do you write, those are the things I'm looking for. I think you can also assess this by whether or not folks actually stop and pause when you ask them questions. So a good, strong support agent should not already be thinking of the answer while the customer is explaining the problem. They should be listening. And you can tell that pretty quickly in an interview setting whether someone does that or if they're looking. Obviously, interviews are nerve-wracking. They're problematic. So we'll always give folks grace, but I think those are the really quick ways that we can begin to assess whether someone possesses those soft skills or whether there might be a gap there that could be problematic for potentially a more senior role. Entry level role, we can train on those things and develop those things, but for a more senior role, obviously, I'm looking for those things coming in the door.
There's some really great tips in there, Jordan, and
Hmm.
I'm sure that will be very useful to a lot of our audience.
Good.
Would like to switch gears and get to your consulting work, right? As I
Hmm.
spoke during my introduction, you also do consulting work with
Hmm.
companies,
Hmm.
and would love to get deeper into that. Uh, when you start, engaging with a company on your consulting work, right? What are generally some patterns on what mistakes or
Hmm.
errors that you might spot very very quickly?
Sure. Yeah, so I primarily do consulting work with also early stage companies, and so I seeing seeing the challenges that those companies have within their support organizations, I think come from a few places. One, they don't hire a leader in soon enough. They allow they hire in folks. They've got support agents. I mean, for a long time, you may have the CEO or the co-founders doing a lot of that support work. Very natural, very common, makes a lot of sense. They're in there doing that day in and out. Well, then you have your first support hire. You bring somebody in, and for me, what I find is organizations often hire that at too junior a level. If you want to build a really strong foundation, bring in somebody that has demonstrated success in growing a support organization from early on, demonstrated success in building the organization. Interestingly enough, I will say for me in my consulting work, if an organization has already done that and that leader has been successful, they're probably not going to call me. That is probably going to exclude them from my customer base. So you've got that challenge of we didn't hire somebody in at the start who has enough foundation. So a lot of these companies, what you'll see happen is they hire some folks in, they build this support organization. Potentially they even promote that original person into a more senior role simply based on tenure, but ultimately it doesn't work out. So you see a cycle of layoffs and then you see more folks coming in, but they're still making those mistakes because at the root, they have not actually set up the organization for success. I think that's one thing. I think the second is just tooling. There's some great support tools out on the market. I have used the majority of them. I enjoy the bells and whistles that I get with all of these, particularly in an enterprise setting. Being able to do all of this customization and have all these features is a really cool and exciting thing. That said, if you're really early stage, the most important thing you can think about in your tooling is simplify. What does it look like to build the workflows and the processes you need for your team and your customers to be successful and not worry about the rest? For some organizations, that could be using a Google inbox for support, and that's fine. Are you measuring? Are you tracking? Are you using labels? Those types of things. Your tool should grow with you. And so, what I find a lot of organizations go do is they get started and they go to Zendesk or they go to Intercom and they get that really shiny, great startup package that either doesn't cost anything for 6 months or a year or barely cost anything. And it's super exciting and they get started. And then the problem is they build too much, or as they build, they don't have the proper understanding and expertise to build it in a way that is actually going to allow them to be successful. So you look at that organization in 2 years and they bring me in and I start looking through just the depths of how their system is set up. And you find this thing here that's like, why is this set up this way? This thing is built on top of this thing that shouldn't be that way. If we had done best practices, we would have done this. And so those organizations at a probably a really critical point in which they really don't need to be doing this. You're talking they're raising their next round of funding. They're getting ready to grow even more. We're having to go like tear down that entire support process and rebuild it from scratch. And so uh, I think those are the two biggest things I see with folks: not hiring in a senior enough leader to build from the start, and investing way too much in tooling way too early in the process, and then just creating more confusion and challenge for your team and your customers.
Totally understand that, Ron. What is generally your approach towards elevating and solving these? Right?
Hmm.
Do you take a
Sure.
very revolutionary approach where you just turn
Hmm.
the house upside down, or you take a more
Sure.
gradual approach?
It depends. Some organizations turning the house upside down is exactly what you need. Unfortunately, I think for a lot of organizations that approach a consultant that does the type of work I do, they may not know that that's what's got to happen. They may be thinking,
Mm.
this is bumpy. We've got some challenges. Let's bring somebody in, have them look at it, and then the consultant gets done with the work and brings in the proposal, and they're like, wait, we need to tear down our entire system. Your recommendation is that we trash everything our team has built over the last 2 years. No thanks, we'll go get a second opinion. Well, if the next consultant is worth their salt, they're probably going to tell them the exact same thing. So learning how to have those conversations with organizations as a consultant, I think, is a really key element.
Mm.
Being able to demonstrate success and saying, hey, I know this is going to be painful, but I've seen this work before. I've done this before. Let me show you some demonstrated patterns. On the other hand, you have customers that come to you and they are just in a complete and utter panic because they know that everything is broken. They understand the depths where they are. Those are probably the more interesting customers to work with because you don't have to convince them of much. You get to get in the door and get the work started and do that. But typically, with either of these, it starts with team interviews, the folks that are day in and day out using their tools. If possible, interviewing customers. If they have friendly customers that are willing to provide feedback about the support experience, that's a critical piece. And then just getting into the tool itself and working through each step of the configuration to see, did we follow best practices for this? Where are the pain points and challenges? And then typically from that can build out a pretty good list of where we need to work on tooling. And that typically also then leads to process changes and opportunities there.
And generally, what's the timeline for doing all of these new engagements, Jordan?
Sure.
What time does it take for you to implement all of this
Mhm.
and put it on autopilot?
Sure. I would say that also depends a lot on one, how much damage potentially has
Mhm.
been done. That's one. Or for an organization that's just growing and just has growing pains that are just standard and normal, where they're at in the process, how much can we change at once without disrupting their ecosystem in such a way that it results in too much pain? Particularly if you're thinking about an organization that's getting ready or has just raised a round of funding and they're very very cautious about what change is going to look like because they want to make sure that they don't mess up as they're starting that process to try to get more funding, or they're just past that and they're wanting to keep that runway and not burn through that cash as fast as possible. Those organizations, um, those will take a little bit longer. But generally, I would say for most organizations, you can accomplish this level of work to get to a really decent foundation in around 3 to 6 months,
Mm.
depending on the willingness of the organization to go fast, the willingness of the organization to break things that potentially are the babies of the co-founders or someone else who's really been invested. Companies that are willing to not say, well, we've always done it this way. Those organizations are the ones that typically you could get this level of work done in 3 to 6 months. And then you can really start looking at what do we do next to make this not just we fix the problem now or we built a stronger foundation now, but what does it look like for this to hold in 2 years, 4 years, 10 years? What does it look like to build that foundation?
Makes sense. Absolutely. The one thing that I would love to also pick your brains on are customer advisory boards, right? And
Mhm.
your experience of doing this, any learnings on how to do this the most
Mhm.
effectively.
Sure, absolutely. I think there's two aspects of this that are really critical. One, you just need to do it. It is really uncomfortable to talk to customers sometimes, particularly when you know something is wrong. When you know there's pain points, when you know there's challenges, it's not fun to talk to your customers and hear that. It's also not fun to sit on a Zoom call or to sit in a room with a few of your customers. There's often, I think, that fear among organizations, gosh, if I put 3 or 4 customers in the same room, what is going to happen? Are they all going to have the same problems? And then suddenly they're going to look at each other and go, hey, have you checked out that other solution that actually does this? Maybe we should all move our business there. So I think there's a fear. around that. So I think number one is you've just got to do it. Number two is don't be afraid to bring customer voices into that room that are going to be challenging and negative.
Mm.
Customer advisory boards are very often populated by friends of folks who work at the company. They're often with other companies that use your tool that potentially have the same investor group, and so you are all very focused on making sure that that organization is happy, so you don't ever rock the boat because you share the same investors. You're going to make sure you're very careful about that. So I think being comfortable bringing voices into the room that are going to be negative, that are going to be challenging, even if your other customers are going to hear that voice, is the thing that is going to drive change. And then the third thing is don't just let it be a checkbox. You need to do this, and then you need to demonstrate from the work that you did with customers and the feedback from customers that you actually went and did something with that feedback. And you need to do that in a really quick and efficient and clear way. If you have those meetings and it's a year later where you're like, hey, you remember that thing we talked about a year ago? Well, we're starting to roll that out. Customers don't want to hear that. That's not doing anything good. Customers want to share that feedback and they want to see actionable steps happening with it quickly. And so I think going with that feedback and using it with haste to solve problems, I think is another critical element there.
Yeah, I think that's a good 360 degree
Sure.
opinion on the effectivity of advisory board. So yeah, definitely very useful. Jordan, lastly, what I would love to touch upon would be AI and
Hmm.
the impact of AI that you might be seeing, on all aspects of customer service,
Hmm.
right? In
Sure.
how we engage or what channels we engage,
Hmm.
to how we automate, how we draw insights, and how we
Hmm.
generally make customer service effective.
Sure. AI is a challenge. I will be the first to say that as a support leader, within the last 3 to 4 years, when AI really started to burst on the scene, and you had all of these companies talking about how they could automate 98% of your work, we can do all these. I struggled with whether to incorporate this, how to incorporate this. I will say, as a sport leader, I hear from I don't know how many companies in a given week that have the AI tool that is supposedly going to solve all of my problems and all of my pain points. And the majority of them are snake oil. They are built on shaky foundations. They are not actually tools that accomplish what they need. And then I found those diamonds in the rough, people who are actually building tools that are uh, helpful, tools that are intended to augment the human experience and to contribute to the human experience as opposed to replacing the human experience. Tools that are developed by people that actually have worked in support and so they understand the experience, they understand what needs to be done. The tools that we need are not tools that are built by folks who are building them in a vacuum. We need folks who are building tools to help us use AI effectively within our organization as people who have experience there. That said, there's some really cool stuff we can do with AI. And I have really enjoyed, particularly in our newer tooling, some of the opportunities we've had to provide self-service to customers. But one of the things I'm really passionate about with it is making sure if a customer interacts with an AI bot that we have created, that we are using, that experience should be just as good as if they had talked to one of my team members. That experience should be brand voice matched. It should be attitude and, as best as possible, empathy matched. That experience for the customer should be no different than if they interacted with my team. And then I think also just recognizing that people, when money's on the line, when emotions are high, when there's challenges, people want to talk to a human. They don't want to talk to a bot. And so I think organizations need to best understand that these tools are there and we should use them. And if we don't use them, we're going to be left behind. But doing it in a way that really drives value for your customers and creates a great experience, I think, is the key element of how you bring AI in. I also think you have to do it slowly. It'd be great to be able to do it fast, but I think if you go slow, you have the opportunity to build something quality that doesn't disrupt your ecosystem in a way that creates more challenges than benefit.
Makes sense, Jordan. And based on the parameters and the conditions that you defined for you being able to use AI effectively, right? Have you found tools that are doing that for you, or are you still on the lookout?
Sure. Yeah, I have found a few tools that do that for us. One of those particularly, my team uses Intercom. We're a brand new Intercom shop. We just finished implementing and went live, and we've had a lot of really great experience utilizing that tool, both as a user of that tool. So that's one aspect of that. And then I think there's just a few other organizations that are building really cool tools. All of them are obviously different. There's a group of guys that are building a company called Yeto. They are a support tool. They are a support tool built by support professionals for support professionals, and so they are thinking with that way of what it looks like to really build a tool that's great. Another really great tool on the market for sentiment analysis is Syncly.
Mhm.
These guys have built a really great tool. They came out of, I think, Y Combinator 2023. Have built a really excellent and interesting and engaging tool to analyze what's going on with your customers. We can QA, but my gosh, I don't have time to
Yeah.
QA all the conversations my team touches in a day. So to have a tool that's dependable and reliable and does that at 100% has been really, really great. So I think those are some of the organizations I've interacted with that I've been really happy to see the work that they're doing and the pieces they're developing related to AI.
Great, Jordan. That's all the questions I had. Great talking to you.
Yeah,
Uh, I think our audience is going to learn a lot from this.
glad to hear. Yeah, thanks so much for having me. This is a great conversation.
Thank you.
Thanks.